One other thing that I want to point out about press pull is that you can do it in some additional ways too as well. And what you can do is you can actually draw on existing objects. And you can use the press pull to define windows, to define openings, to extrude some parts of it, so on and so forth. So in order to do this, I would take one of my objects, okay, and I'm going to take this one in the middle. So I'm going to erase the rest of these guys. Okay, and I'm going to use my draw tools, and I'm going to type in L for line. And you'll see that when I mouse over these surfaces, what it does is it selects that surface. And what that does is it's AutoCAD recognizing that I can essentially draw on that surface. So it's going to ask me to specify my first point, and this is where you have to make sure that your snaps, okay, are working and that you're comfortable with them. I usually have my nearest on just to make sure that I'm on the nearest point on that object or that line, and I'm going to click on the nearest, and I'm going to bring it up and make sure it's perpendicular to that surface. Okay, I can draw another one, or I can copy it over. And the only tricky thing about this is that you have to make sure that you're actually on this surface. So if you find that your press pull is not recognizing it, sometimes you just have to redraw it. Make sure that you always do this with your snaps on, because it might not recognize it. So just make sure that you follow that and you should be fine. So again, if I have my snaps on, okay, I can start to make these shapes. This is, again, just using my nearest. And usually what I do is I just do a little swoosh around, okay, a little once over to make sure that everything looks good. And then I can use my press pull, okay, and it works on surfaces too as well. So I can actually select that surface and I can extrude it out, okay, or I can select a surface. And if I punch through the object, what it does is it actually makes a void or an opening. Okay, so this is another way that you could actually work with modeling and create objects that are a little bit more unique, not as defined by the modeling tools that AutoCAD has. And you can start to, play around with it a little bit. What I like about this is that, it allows you to be a little bit more free with the design process. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this for clarity's sake, and I'm going to introduce you to not only the sweep, the revolve, and the loft tool, but also moving and rotating and scaling solids in 3D. So before we begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a series of shapes. So the first one, and again, they're just going to be arbitrary, and I just use the polyline tool, is going to be just a random shape. Okay, the second is I'm going to freehand draw a little star here. Okay, and I'm going to copy this. Okay, so the first one, what I want to do is I want to create a loft. And what that does is it lofts cross sections or objects from object to object. And it creates, a unique object like that. So what I'm going to do is I have to rotate it, because right now what happens is I am, the object is sitting on the plane here, okay? And what I want to do is I want to make sure that it's essentially standing up. So under my selection, okay, if I go to rotate gizmo and I click on the object, what pops up is this circular rotation for this object. And what this does is that no matter what I select, okay, this is what's going to pop up. So if I want to have move be my default, okay, I'm going to click on move, so that when I click on the object, you'll see that I can move it. Okay, if I want to rotate it, it'll change it to rotate. If I want to scale it, it'll change it to scale, or I can actually have no gizmo. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the use the rotate, and the way that we use these tools is what I need to do is I need to mouse over an axis, and you see when I do, it highlights yellow, and you'll see that it has a color that's associated with the axis that is selected. So for example, if I want to rotate this so that it's standing up, I'm going to use this red axis, and in order to do that, I'm going to click on it. Okay, and you'll see that now I snap to it so that I can't move it other ways. Okay, and then I'm going to use my ortho, and I'm going to specify it so that it's rotating up to my ortho one, and I'm going to click. And now you'll see that it's rotating up. You can use any of the two-dimensional moves, rotates, scales, any of those tools. The only thing is that once you start to work with 3D, your axes might start to get a little confused. So it's not that easy of a process, and so what this does, it helps to constrain it a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it up. So I'm going to change my gizmo to the move gizmo. Same thing works for this, is that if I mouse over the axis, okay, that I want to constrain it to, so let's use it the z-axis. I'm going to mouse over that. I'm going to click on it to constrain it, and then I'm just going to arbitrarily move it up. Okay, you can also type in a distance too as well. Now to continue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the copy command like I would with my 2D objects or working in 2D AutoCAD, and I'm going to copy these over. Okay, so that now I have two copies of them. I am going to select one, move one up, and I'm going to select the other, and let's say move it over here, and down a bit. Okay, so what my loft tool does is it allows me to loft a shape between these cross sections. So if I expand the extrude button, you'll see it's underneath. It's the loft. I'm going to click on the cross sections, and what you need to be specific about is the order that you're lofting them in. So I'm going to select the first one, the second one, and the third one, and you'll see the resultant shape of that. And when I'm done, I'm going to hit enter. It's going to ask me an option. Okay, I'm going to say cross sections only, and then it's going to define that shape for me. Okay, now with these other shapes, I'm going to move them over here. What we're going to do with these is we're going to actually extrude them along a path. And this you can do the same with the extrude tool, in that I am going to draw a path with a polyline. Okay, you can use a spline too. I just find that with the spline, it tends to get a little bit pickier whether it wants to use it or not. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these stars, and I'm going to take my rotate gizmo, and I'm going to flip it up. Okay, so now you'll see that the star is standing up, and the path is here. And I'm going to take my move tool, and I'm going to just like we would in 2D, and I'm just going to move it over. Okay, so again, you can use a mixture of the both, whether you want to use a 3D move or the 2D move. Again, you'll figure out, which ones essentially work best with each other, okay, or with a certain task. So for this, I'm going to select sweep, okay, and I'm going to select the object to sweep, and then I'm going to select, and I hit enter, and then select the path to sweep. So essentially what it does is it takes that object and it sweeps it along a path. You can do, so for example, if I say undo, you can do the same thing with extrude. If I go back to extrude, okay, it's going to ask me to select my objects to extrude, or I'm going to hit enter, and then underneath specify the height of the extrusion, you'll see that there is an option for path. And so I'm going to click on path, and I'm going to click on the path that I created, and it essentially does the same thing. Now what the sweep does is, if you notice, I'm going to put these two side by side, so I'm going to select those guys and copy them. Let's do the extrude again. So I'm going to select the object to extrude, hit enter. Now I'm going to select P for path, or if you use your dynamic input like I do, I just hit the down arrow key, select path. Okay, and then I'm going to use my sweep, select my object, hit enter, select my sweep path. Okay, you'll see that with the sweep, it's a little bit more made for this. Okay, that it basically takes the star, okay, and it sets it perpendicular to the path itself. Okay, so that's a bit of the difference with it. You can do the same thing for the extrude. But what you have to do is you have to make sure that the star is actually perpendicular to the path, which is already accounted for with the sweep. Okay, and the other one is revolve, and I'm not going to use that star because I already copied those. The other one is revolve, and what this allows you to do is it allows you to take an object and revolve it in 360 degrees in order to get a profile. So the easiest thing, I think, or the easiest example would be like a cup or a vase or something like that. So again, I'm going to use my polyline, and I'm going to draw basically the side wall of a cup, okay, and a profile of the bottom of it. And I'm just doing this freehand. Okay, and I'm going to snap back at this and hit enter. After I create my profile, what I want to do is now I want to click on my revolve tool. I'm going to select my object to revolve, hit enter, and then specify the axis point or define axis. What that's basically asking me to do is to define the axis about which this is going to revolve around. So I'm going to click on the endpoint of this profile on my bottom here, click on the other endpoint, and now you'll see that essentially it allows me to revolve this shape around. You can do it arbitrarily, or if you hit enter, the default is 360 degrees. And then in this case, what I would do is I would rotate this cup, okay, to stand up on its end. So what I can do is I can select it and have the rotate gizmo, or what I can also do is I can use my 3D rotates, 3D moves, all of those tools. They do the same thing, but there's actually commands for them. So if I type in 3D rotate, you'll see that I can get the same tool only by using this command. So I'm going to select my object, hit enter, and you'll see that the same rotate tool comes up where I'm going to constrain my mouse to the y-axis, okay, and I'm going to flip it up. Okay, you'll see that it does, mediate, the 0 point on the x and the y-axis. Usually what happens is if I want something to be right on the 0, essentially sitting right on the plane of it, I'm just going to draw a line and hit enter. And essentially what I can do is select this, pick a point right on the bottom of it, and just snap it to that line. Okay, that's how I know, in my methodology, how I can actually get that cup to sit right on that 0 plane. Okay, and as I said, 3D rotate is not the only tool that you can access by using a command. You can also say 3D move, which does the same thing. Okay, and there's also 3D scale, and that allows you to use the scale, and essentially that constrains the scale in an axis as opposed to having that be arbitrary. Okay, you can also do the same thing with the two-dimensional tools, in that I can type in scale, I can select my object, and I can say, well, I want it to be 1.75. Okay, and that's going to scale it up for me. So again, you can use both two-dimensional and three-dimensional tools for this.